My name is Karen A. Good morning here in Jerusalem, but if you're in another time zone, good afternoon, good evening, good dawn, whatever time it is, we're so happy to have you here. And we hope that you will be too, or that you will at least feel that you found some solace. Oh, nice. Artist Hannah, that's cool. I was just there a few weeks ago. Zichron Yaakov, actually. Nice to see everybody. Yeah, you can say your name, where you're from if you want in the chat, or don't. We're just so happy to have you here. This is the Afro-Euro Reco12 podcast, part of Reco12.com. Reco12 is a family of recovery resources for addicts who are suffering from different addictions or afflictions. So whether your problem is cocaine, heroin, sex, love, validation, workaholism, Al-Anon, maybe you're an Al-Anon, maybe you are a gambler, a debtor, and you could feel free to add anything to the list. We share our experience, strength, and hope from our own personal recovery from those conditions. If you go to the Reco12.com website, you can hear from Justin B., the founder of this amazing series. Justin started the original Reco12 podcast in Washington. He brought in Nikki M from Noodle It Out with Nikki. She takes us through the big book and different hot topics in the big book and tackles different angles, noodles out, whether it's your substance addiction, your people addiction, your emotion addiction, your disease of your thinking that centers in your mind. She tackles a bunch of great topics. Highly recommend listening to anything that Nikki M or Justin B have on there. There are great big book roundtables with different speakers. And of course, our little local meeting here online in the Afro-Euro Timezone, which is getting bigger and better every day with meaning. The Afro-Euro Reco12 podcast every Friday here at 8 a.m. UK time. It's 10 a.m. here in Israel and in South Africa. If you'd like to contribute at Seventh Tradition, you could do so. There are some costs for the recording platforms and Zoom platforms. You can go to reco12.com/support, and we do accept PayPal or Venmo. And again, I encourage you to go to reco12.com to listen to different shares, whether you're power walking, driving, hiking. They are awesome. Without further ado, I'm so excited to meet a new brother here, Yisrael C, here in the Holy Land. Not so far away from me, and yet I had to get on Zoom to meet him. And that's just so cool. Yisrael, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, your topic today, and you only have 30 minutes to share. Maybe before we start, go ahead and put your number in the chat if people want to reach out to you with questions or need help with sponsors, sponsees, and anything else recovery related. And without further ado, Yisrael C., welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much. My name is Yisrael C., and I'm an alcoholic. I'm named after perhaps the largest soup company in the United States of America. I am a big fan of the traditions, and I endeavor to respect them. I don't think using my last name on a recording is a problem, but I will respect your wishes. But should I get run over by a bus and Karen tries to find me, it's going to be doubly difficult as Yisrael C. That happened to me once. Lonnie's here from Florida. Lonnie and I got sober I was sober a few years when Lonnie got sober. We were both sober very, very young. In the early 1980s. I'll tell you exactly when in a second. But I went to see a fellow from the program in the hospital, and I walked up to the information desk, and I said, I need to find my friend Bill's room number. And she said, what's Bill's last name? And I thought about it, and I said, I don't know. And she said, friend, huh? And she started laughing at me. And I thought, yeah, you're right. You're right. Anyway, I only have 30 minutes. I'm not going to spend it in an internal discussion with the traditions, arguing both sides, which I can do. My name is Yisrael. I am an alcoholic. I have a home group. It's the Mediterranean group. It meets on Wednesday nights, also on Zoom at 9 p.m. local time. I'm in Israel. I'm in Jerusalem. That is the city of the sky over the city of Jerusalem. I've been sober since the 14th of February, 1980, which is 45 years and about 8 months, but who's counting? I once heard someone in Texas say that, or from Texas, that if you don't say your sobriety date, it's probably because you don't have one. And it's always been, I think, an important information because I do really believe that abstinence is the beginning of this process. It is in the steps. People like to say the first step is the only step we have to work perfectly. I think that what they mean to say is that only the first half of the first step is something that we have to work perfectly. In that, I really want to. I believe in spiritual experience. I'll speak deeply about it, I hope, today. But I also believe in the no matter what club and the, you just if you don't pick up a drink. I've seen it. I've seen people not stay sober and stay around these rooms, and their experience seems to me to be circular in that it repeats. It's kind of like Groundhog's Day. And I've seen people not pick up. My frame of reference is Alcoholics Anonymous. My frame of reference is alcohol and drugs. I believe that we all practice the same, no matter how we come to this, we all practice the same spiritual recovery, spiritual experience. As a point of identification, if you're a gambler, I don't get you. I just don't. I don't understand it. I'm a nickel slots kind of guy, I will pay nickel slots all day long. But I would never put paper money on a gambling table or bet my house or bet my car or bet my children or bet my wife or bet my husband or bet someone a blowjob. I would never do it. I just wouldn't do it. There's plenty of other things I would do. We can discuss them in the privacy of our own homes and on our phones. But there's certain things I don't get. But after that, it's all the same recovery in my book. I've had sponsees that, deep into the third step, they tell me they're going to ACA now. And then deep into the third step of that program, they tell me they're going to Al-Anon now. And deep into the third step of that program, they tell me they're going to NA now. And I say, 3 steps in 4 programs is not 12 steps. Right? I believe the spiritual recovery that happens here happens as a result of the process of the 12 steps. After that point of identification or non-identification, I'm all yours. I'm all yours. But I would suggest for you to find a place where you can sit in a room with a group of people that are just like you. I go to Al-Anon, but I honestly, I'm not that kind of person. I'm alcoholically self-centered. My life is filled with alcoholics, but I don't think the way they think. I just don't. A little bit I do, and I think I learn a lot, and I have an Al-Anon sponsor. But, anyway, let me just go back and tell you my story, because it's the only really way now that I know to tell this story is that I picked up my first drink when I was 9. I like to think that I waited. And I say that because when I picked up my first drink, it was the answer to a question I didn't know I was asking. It was the solution to a problem I didn't know I had. I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't know if what I'm about to say is medically true. I don't know if fear, anxiety, self-centeredness, self-seeking, absolute self-containment can be passed through breast milk. But if it can, it was in my case. Because as far back as I remember, that's the way I was. And I took a drink and it evaporated that stuff. 2 things happened the first night I drank. I was 9. I have a memory of walking up to a grown man who was walking his dog, putting my arm around his shoulder, looking him in the eye and saying, "Get bent." I don't know what that means today, but it was the ability. And I know it's a questionable story because I was 9 and I say I'm 5'9" now, but I have a friend who's 5'9" who towers over me. And she says I'm more like 5'7" or 5'6" even. When she's angry, she says that. Anyway, when I was 9, I was a lot shorter. So did I walk up to a grown man but that's what I remember. And that's what alcohol did for me consistently. It gave me spiritual recovery, and I'll hit on that again in a moment. And the other thing it allowed me to do was throw up in my sleeping bag. And so as to not get caught, my cousin wouldn't let me let his mother clean my sleeping bag, so I slept in my puke for a week. It's not that bad. The first night you kind of squeegee it out with your arm. The next night it's drying. By the third night it's flaking off. By the end of the week, you barely remember vomiting there. And that is crucial to me. Because if you'd come up to me a week later and said, what did alcohol do for you or to you? I would have said it allowed me to walk up to a grown man, put my arm around his shoulder, look him in the eye and say, get bent. I would have already forgotten it allowed me to sleep in my puke for a week. And I was constantly forgetting the things that alcohol did to me to remember the things that alcohol did for me. And one other thing I want to say about alcohol, and then I want to get on with it. We would drive into West Philadelphia, which was, for lack of a better word and for lack of time to discuss this, it was the ghetto, it was Ramallah, it was not a neighborhood where four little white boys should be driving. We would steal my friend Brink's mother's car. We were all 14, 15 years old. We would 13 years, some of us were 13 years old. We would drive into West Philadelphia, buy a case of beer, throw it in the trunk of the car, drive it back out to the suburbs, throw it in the woods, and go home for the afternoon and dinner, and then come back and drink it that night. I felt better once the beer was in the car. I didn't have to take a drink. I had to know I had access to a drink, and I felt better. That is a powerful, powerful substance. But I stopped drinking when I was 16 years old. I promise you, I have the least tragic alcoholic story in the room. My money is on Katie, but I can't be sure. I don't know some of the people. I want to thank the people that have their cameras on. As much as I enjoy talking, it's a lot easier talking to actual faces that have expression rather than names or pictures, which don't. But I'm not shaming you. I realize there must be something going on in your life, and that's why you can't find your way to turning on your camera. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you. I'm going to stop there and move on, rather than try and get everyone to turn on their camera. So that's what alcohol did for me. Again, I want to stress, I drank for 7 years, start to finish. I'm really stretching the story as far as I possibly can. Like, I drank consistently for like 4 years, 3 years. I smoked pot. All the cocaine I snorted was off the back of my high school ID card. Like, I was not Tony Montana and Scarface and falling into piles of cocaine. Like, we're talking about like 2 lines each. You know, I smoked angel dust by accident. Like, I did a lot of pills, but basically the guy I called my drug dealer was a fellow 11th grader. And I realize now he was basically stealing his mother's pills and selling them to me. So I was basically being medicated as a middle-aged menopausal woman. So I was taking a lot of like appetite suppressants, i.e. speed, some better, some worse. I know I was stealing my own mother's, my mother was also midlife depressed and menopausal, so I was stealing her drugs. And I know there I was taking estrogen for a while because she was on estrogen replacement therapy. The only thing I can say is thank God estrogen doesn't get you high, because if it had gotten me high, I would have kept taking it. You know, I was the kind that took a pill and then went and looked up what it was supposed to do to me. I didn't care. Up, down, sideways, I don't care. Not here. That's what I want a pill to do. Take me out of right now. Take me out of me here. And that's what it did. And so I came to Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 16 years old because I had a hit and run accident with a Catholic priest. You might think that's a different story than it was, but I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, an Irish Italian Catholic kid from Philadelphia. I sit before you, an Orthodox Jew, marginally. I'm not the best Jew in the world, but that's actually the best Jews are the worst Jews, turns out. Anyway, that, you know, nobody knows what I'm talking about, not even me. Okay, so let me just start over. I came to you, an Irish Italian.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean, right? It's we agnostics. What you mean, even though we just met, but we're brother and sister, we agnostics says that we could pray 3 times a day. We could dress in the most religious garb. We could go in the holiest of holies, but yet if we don't live with a higher power moment to moment, we're toast. That's what I think you mean, right?
Exactly.
That's what you mean. And the big book tells us that, right? God is everything or God is nothing. Right. And it got nothing to do with your beard.
That makes it all God. That makes the curse words God. That makes the coming to the meeting late God. That makes the leaving the meeting early God. That makes the I refuse to have a commitment or a home group God. It's all God. It's not satisfying to me, but it's all God. Brandy, I think you're unmuted and talking. I think it's you. Anyway, let me get back to the story because I just want to set up the stark relief of the two statements. I came to you an Irish, Italian, Catholic kid from Philadelphia. I sit before you an Orthodox Jew living in Jerusalem for the last 25 years. You can't go to your high school guidance counselor at Archbishop John Carroll High School for Boys and say, I'd like to end up an Orthodox Jew living in Jerusalem. That's not an option. You can't get where I am from where I was except by God. Except by participating in a spiritual path of recovery. I don't even like saying by God because it makes it seem like God came down and took my hand and, walked me along this path. A friend who I didn't know him that well. I didn't hardly know him at all. A guy named Larry T just passed away recently. Used to say to newcomers, welcome to being divinely inconvenienced for the rest of your life. That's how I got here. By a long series of divine inconveniences. Ask Karen. She wanted me to speak last week. I wanted to speak this week. We're both hard-headed. We went back and forth, sideways, checking calendars, saying things were this date when it was really that date. Finally, you know what happened? You know what happened last Saturday? I started wishing I had spoken last the Friday. By last night, I was like, I don't know why I didn't just do what Karen asked. That's how I best serve the world, to be divinely inconvenienced on a regular basis for the rest of my life. Because I still don't know plans. I still don't know who's what and who wants what. And, and the reason I chose this topic and something to the effect of the power of storytelling is because I think that is what this is based on. I have heard stories throughout my sobriety that have fed me profoundly. Some of which I'll tell today, some of which I won't. The one that pops to mind was by a man named it's a famous story told by a man named Clint Hodges, who if you have cassette tapes in your home somewhere and there's one of Clint, pop it in and listen to it. If you don't have access to cassette tapes or even know what they are, then just go on the internet and Google Clint Hodges, Clint H, AA speaker. He's amazing. He's passed away now many years, but he's amazing. Not Jewish, but certainly his memory is for a blessing. And the first story that I ever heard Clint tell, and then years later he became my sponsor, and I heard Clint tell he was a great storyteller, but was the fish, in this fishing village. The fishermen come in every day with boats full of fish, and there's this guy. He's one of us. He's a guy like us. He's a guy like me. And he just walks down the dock and says, hey, man, give me a fish. And, he's a drag to be around, and he's a bummer. And so they throw him a fish, and he disappears. He eats his fish the next day. Hey, man, give me a piece of fish. And one day he comes upon this fisherman, who's obviously an AA member, having worked the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and says, I can't give you a piece of fish. He says, what up, man? You got a whole boat full of fish. Just give me a piece of fish. He says, I can't give you a piece of fish. He says, I'd like to, because you're a drag, and I know if I did, you'd get out of here. He says, but I can't do it. But I'll tell you what. I'll teach you how to fish. I'll teach you how to fish, and you'll never have to ask for a piece of fish again in your life. I don't want to ask. I don't want to learn how to fish. I'm not capable of fishing. I get sick on the water. I got 1,000 reasons why I shouldn't be a fisherman. But that's what AA is repeated. And by AA, I mean the 12 steps and spiritual recovery, however that manifests for you. Time and time again, from the beginning till now, I've had to learn how to fish. One more time. Clint's first sponsor was a man named Clancy Imislin, also of blessed memory, whose memory is also for a blessing, certainly in these rooms. Clancy used to tell the invisible boat story about a guy who found himself in the middle of the ocean without a life raft or a life preserver or anything, and he's treading water. He can't see land in any direction, and he's treading water, but he knows he's going to drown. And suddenly he sees these two guys rowing towards him, far in the distance, but he's treading water now, and he has hope because they're rowing towards him, and they pull up next to him, and they don't have a boat. They're just sitting in the water rowing. And they say, "Get in, man." And he says, "You don't have a boat." They said, "Just get in, man. As long as you row, you won't sink." And just as he's about to get in, he sees this big, luxurious ocean liner pull up, and it says 28 days, detox and rehabilitation, Pilates, biofeedback, yoga, colonics, self-care, self-love. It has flashing stuff. And they say, "Hey man, would you like to get on the boat?" And he looks at the two boats and he says, "Yeah, I'd love." He gets on the big ocean liner. And it's all true. He does Pilates, he does yoga, he gets nutritional consultations, he eats better, he has a colonic, which is a fire hose up your butt. He gets cleaned out, and he's going to step workshops, and he's hearing speakers at night, and he's just loving it, And then at the 28th day, the captain comes up to him. They're still out in the middle of the ocean. And the captain says, "Okay, time to get off the boat." And he says, "What do you mean get off the boat?" He says, "This is a 28-day stay."
Got questions about addiction, recovery, or just life in general? Let's noodle it out together. Grab your big book, a pen, a highlighter, and a notepad, and join Nikki M and me, Justin B, on Reco12 Noodle It Out with Nikki M. Each episode, we take real-life questions, ours, yours, and those from the recovery community, and dig deep into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to find real, practical solutions. So, if you're ready to do the work and apply the solution, tune in to Noodle It Out with Nikki M, streaming now on your favorite podcast platform.
He says, "But I don't have a life raft and I don't know how to swim." He says, "Sorry." And he pushes him off the boat, and the ocean liner pulls away, and he's back in the water, treading water, and knows he's going to drown. And suddenly the two guys in the invisible boat come up and row up to him, and they say, "Get in the boat, man." And he doesn't have any other option, so he gets in the boat, and they say, "Just as long as you keep rowing, you won't sink." And so he rows, and sure enough, he's not sinking. And the three of them are now rowing an invisible boat with invisible oars, and they're not sinking. And he has to test it, right? We all have to test it at some point. So he stops rowing, and he starts sinking. And the guys look at him and go, "Dude, you gotta row. As long as you row, you won't sink." And that's what I've been in. I've been in an invisible boat for 45 years. Sure, I can tell you exactly what I did. And I 100% I don't believe that this program doesn't work for anyone that works it. This program doesn't work for people that attend meetings but don't work the program. And that's where the whole anger at meeting makers make it comes from. Right? Of course meeting makers make it. What are you, a fucking retard? Of course they make it. Sorry. Just wanted to get everyone's attention, especially the people without their cameras on. I know I'm not supposed to say either one of those words. I just wanted your attention to say, of course, people that go to meetings make it. It's the people that only go to meetings and don't do anything else. Spectators. This is not a sobriety. Recovery is not a spectator sport. The spectators don't make it because they're not doing it. They're not, and God bless them. The beauty of this, what makes this not a cult, is you don't have to do it. And if you do it, we won't take your money. And if you do it, we're going to insist you heal your relationship with your families. Right? Those are two things that cults do. Take your money and break your relationship with your family. We won't do that. In fact, no matter how horrible you say they are, You know what we're going to say? Send them a Christmas card. Because they're your parents, dumbass. That's the only reason. And say hello and do this. And soon enough, a very close friend of mine who will rail on about this being blah, 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 though he has 42 years of sobriety, has a tremendous relationship with his father today because one day I was sitting at coffee with him and I said I hadn't spoken to my uncle in a few years. And he said, call your uncle. And I said, I'll call my uncle if you call your father. Rowing the invisible boat. Me and my uncle have a nice relationship, not a close relationship. He and his father, who he hadn't spoken to in 25 years, have a tremendously close relationship. I don't know how it's going to manifest, but I know it will if you do the work. So what are the couple of things I want to talk about? This idea of storytelling starts for me with Bill and Bob. Right? Bill, let's just refresh ourselves, refresh our memories. Bill is staying at the Mayflower Hotel. It's now a, single room occupancy drug den. I say that in the nicest possible way. I'm a fan of, it's a shithole now, but it was the best hotel in Akron, Ohio in 1935 when Bill went there. And Bill did a little business deal that fell apart, and Bill didn't have money to pay for the room he was staying in. And he was 6 months sober. That's a bind, right? That's a bit of a bind. So he goes downstairs and he gets to the hallway, and at the one end of the hallway is the bar. And he can hear the tinkling of the glasses and the laughter, and and he thinks, you can correct me later if I'm wrong, but I don't believe he wanted to go to the bar to drink. I think he wanted to go to the bar to feel better. To just have a sense of ease and comfort by being around people that were drinking. I love that. Until they get really drunk and then tell me, you're not being open and honest. You should be more transparent. You're holding back, man. I'm like, anyway. That's my understanding is he didn't want to drink. And at the other end of the hallway was a telephone. The telephone next to it was a church directory. Now, I don't know that much about Bill or Bob. I'm not a big, I don't know every detail. I don't know what kind of shoes they wore or underwear they wore, boxer briefs. I don't know. What I do know is that of the two, Bill was the less religious one. Right? We know that from his story, right? He was not like, I'm going to say that in that moment, the easier, softer way would have been the bar. But he turned to the phone, knowing he needed to find another alcoholic. And he called 10 people. I think 5 would have entitled me to stop calling and to go to the bar. Again, not to drink, just to sit there and be in self. But he didn't. He kept calling. And on the 10th call, Reverend Tunks, weird name, says, yeah, I know an alcoholic. He doesn't mean an alcoholic. He means a member of the Oxford group, Henrietta Seiberling, heir to the Seiberling Firestone tire fortune, wife to the heir of the fortune, living in the guest house at the time. I believe they were separated at the time. Anyway, he calls Henrietta. Henrietta and Bill talk, and Henrietta says, I know an alcoholic, thinking of Dr. Bob Smith. And she calls the Smith household. Ann didn't have a cell phone. And Ann answered the phone. It was Saturday afternoon, and Bob was already passed out at the dining room table. And she said, we'll come and see you tomorrow. My understanding is Henrietta had Bill come out that night. The next day, Ann said in an Al-Anon way, and those of you that are in Al-Anon will know what I mean. She said, oh, we'll be there tomorrow. and they were going to be there tomorrow if Bob was in a body bag. Right? Because he went out to get a plant for her for Mother's Day, came back drunk, passed out at the table. Lovely, lovely. Really, really getting out of self with the plant. Good job, Bob. And the next day they go, and I heard his son, Bob Smith Jr., tell this story at a conference in Texas in the 1980s. Bob Smith Jr. was a teenager, and I believe he was driving the car. And Bob said to Ann, we'll give this bird 15 minutes. And what did she mean? What did he mean? He meant we're polite, we're good Americans, we're from the Midwest, originally from Vermont, we're Yankees, we're Christians, we're not going to not show up. We said we would. But I'm not going to sit here and be lectured by some New York stockbroker about alcoholism. I don't think he said any of this, but this is what I hear him thinking. I'm a doctor. I know everything there is to know about alcoholism. I'm a member of the Oxford Group. I'm a good Christian. Except for my drinking, I'm a good Christian. I know everything there is to know, both about the medical aspects of alcohol as well as the spiritual aspects of recovery. We'll give this bird 15 minutes. And what happens? They go in and Bob sits with Bill, and Bill says, thank you, Bob, for coming. I need you. Well, that's different. You'd never heard that before. And then one alcoholic talking to another, something happened that doesn't happen, in my experience, when we talk to doctors or coaches or therapists or counselors or priests or rabbis that don't know what we are, that don't suffer from addiction. There's very few people in my experience, and I might be wrong, that really get this, that don't have this. Rabbi Abraham Twersky, who was the head of the Gateways medical facility and a Hasidic rabbi, a member of a Hasidic group, he got it, and had worked the steps several times, but he wasn't one of us. A blessed memory, he is. Anyway, they sat for 6 hours, and what comes out of that meeting ultimately is this meeting. This meeting is directly tied back to that meeting. And millions of people in recovery based upon a model of telling our stories. I want to tell one more story and then I'll stop. It's a story about the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was the founder of Hasidic Judaism. He lived in the Carpathian Mountains of Ukraine, what's now Ukraine, in the late 1700s. And again, I'm not a religious scholar and I'm not a theologian. I'm a storyteller. Judaism had ossified. It had become stiff. It had lost its flexibility. It had lost its joy. It had lost its, it became about academia. And I would say that there are meetings that have had that happen to them. And members of AA and all the 12-step programs that have had that happen to them. People who say things like, this is a deadly disease. I'm not here to have fun. In fact, the big book says we must have fun. I don't have time to quote it now, but it says we must have fun. It uses the word fun. It's in the family afterwards, and I know those aren't the hallowed 102 pages. It used to be the 164 pages, but now it's 103 pages, right? It's really only through the steps that we actually care about what the book says. And then it's just heebie-jeebie mumbo-jumbo into the wives and the family afterwards and to the employers. And so it had become ossified. And when the Baal Shem Tov was dying, he gave each of his followers a job, and he gave the big guys the big jobs. And there was this one little chassid that just loved the Baal Shem Tov, and he was waiting to get a job, waiting, and all the jobs were being given to other people. And finally, the Baal Shem Tov called him, and he was so excited to get a job because he'd been waiting so long, and he loved the Baal Shem Tov so much. And the Baal Shem Tov said, you will be our storyteller. You will go throughout Europe and tell the stories of our life and our work. And the first thing he said, like so many of us when we get a job in AA, right? What's the first thing you say when you get a commitment at your home group? For how long? You haven't even started yet, and already you want to stop. Right? And he said, for how long? And the Baal Shem Tov said, you'll know when to stop. And that's what he did after he died and after he was buried. And He went out and he crisscrossed Europe telling the stories of the life and the work of the Baal Shem Tov. And that's what he was, the storyteller of the Baal Shem Tov. And finally one day he woke up and he said, I think I'm done. I just feel done. And then he heard there was an Italian nobleman who was paying gold ducats to hear new stories of the Baal Shem Tov, and he thought, maybe I'm not done. And he made his way to Italy, and he was brought in to see this rich man in a big castle, and he's brought in, and the man comes in, sits right now in front of him, and they look at each other, and the man is so happy to see him, and he looks at him, and he can't think of a single story. Not a single story, not one. Sits there all day looking at the man, can't think of a single story. And the man just sits and sits and sits. And finally the man says, look, get something to eat, get some rest, take a bath, play some tennis, whatever. Late 1700s. Probably not tennis. And the next day he comes in and they sit together all day long again. And for 3 days he sits there. And finally the little chassid says, look, I am the storyteller of the Baal Shem Tov. That's all I do is tell stories of the Baal Shem Tov. And I can't think of a single story and I'm going to leave because this is humiliating. And the man doesn't want him to leave, but he lets him go. And he's making his way down the path to the village. And suddenly he thinks of one story, seemingly inconsequential, seemingly insignificant. And he says, I'm not going to take any money for this story, but I'm going to go back and tell him. And he does. He goes back and he says, look, I can't take money, but I want to tell you the story. It doesn't make any sense to tell you this story, but I just want to prove that I am who I say I am. And he tells him the following story. One spring season, the Baal Shem Tov says, get the horses ready. We're going to Turkey. And the little chassid says, Turkey's not a good place to go in the spring. It's Easter. The Christians, yell at us and they scream at us and sometimes they kill us. And the Baal Shem Tov says, get the horses ready. We're going to Turkey. And they go to Turkey and they pull into this little village. And sure enough, the Jews are hiding and their shutters are battened, whatever that means. And as were their hatches. And Baal Shem Tov goes in, throws open the shutters that look down on the town square just as the Christian procession is entering the town square. And he says, go get the bishop. And the little chassid says, the bishop, the guy with the big hat and the stick? I don't think he doesn't look very happy. Bishops rarely look happy. And he makes his way down through the crowd and nobody says anything to him and nobody screams at him. And he gets to the bishop and he says, the Baal Shem Tov wants to speak to you. And he says, after I say the mass, I'll come up and speak to him. And he does. And they go into a back room for 3 hours. And finally they're done. And the Baal Shem Tov comes out. And he says, get the horses ready. We're going home. And he says, the horses are already ready. And they leave. And before he can look up one more time and apologize to this nobleman for telling him an inconsequential, insignificant story, before he can apologize, he looks up and the nobleman puts up his hand and stops him from speaking. His face has entirely changed. His whole outlook on life has changed, we may say. He's crying and he stops him from speaking. And finally he says, I was that bishop. I came from a long line of rabbis, and for many years I was so afraid of the persecution that after a time I converted to Christianity, and the Christians so loved that after some time they made me their bishop. And I went along each year with the persecution and even killing of my own people, and so when you came to me and said that the Baal Shem Tov wanted to speak to me, I knew I had to go, and I did, and I spoke to him, and I asked him if there was anything I could do to be forgiven and be healed. And he said, go live a life of quiet, good deeds. And if anyone ever comes and tells your story, you will know that you have been forgiven and you have been healed. And 3 days ago, you came here and you couldn't even see me. And I saw you and I recognized you immediately, but you couldn't see me. And now today you've told my story. And while you told my story, I realized that I have been forgiven and I have been healed. And I would say to you that it's here in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever fellowship you attend that we hear our stories told. And that when we do hear our stories told, we know that we've been forgiven and we've been healed. But we don't tell our own stories here. That's not what we do. We do tell our own stories here, but not for us to hear. We tell our stories here for others to hear. My healing comes from hearing Ria and Katie and Brindy and Lonnie and Gloria. My healing here does not come from Yisrael hearing Yisrael. Chuck Chamberlain, who gave the talks, which became the book, A New Pair of Glasses, used to say, Don't look for the solution in the problem. The solution isn't part of the problem. It's part of the solution. For me to learn from my story is looking for the solution in the problem. I learned from Clint. I learned from Clancy. I learned from Howard. I learned from Bob. I learned from Connie. I learned from all the people that were my sponsors. Those are the people I named. Jim. I learned from all of you. The second step says we came to believe in a power greater than ourselves that could restore us to sanity. You and I together are a power greater than me. That's where it starts for me, and that's where ultimately it ends. Yeah, I've gone on the e-ticket ride. I went in full for, I got the strings, I got the hat, I got the hair, I got the beard. It's like, what else do you got? Oh, something to wear when I pray around my waist to separate my heart from my lascivious self? Well, I'll take one of those. Really? Do I think my prayers need such separation? Come on, man. I'm praying, and I'm the dribble down the front of your shirt kind of prayer, not the hear it in heavens kind of prayer. The where place my prayers near to be heard is here. I have to say my prayers so I hear them. Forget whether or not God hears them. It's immaterial. So I tell my story so you can heal, and you tell your story so I can heal. So I implore you to stay so that I can heal. That's what Bill said to Bob. Bob, I need you. I need to talk to you as if it were for you. If it's just for me, it's more self. And what I have is a disease of selfishness and self-centeredness. Alcohol, the book says, was but a symptom. Carl Jung says, and then Karen, I promise I'll stop. Carl Jung says it. Where is he? He says it to Bill Wilson in his letter from the early 1960s. Right? I don't have time. It's the letter about Roland. Bill wrote and said, thank you, Carl Jung. You helped found the program. He's a bit of a showman. We know that. But he's Karata Tov. He's calling out the good. That's good. That's good. He says, Jung writes him back and says, of course. He says this of Roland's drinking. His craving for alcohol was the equivalent on a low level of the spiritual thirst of our being for wholeness, expressed in medieval language, the union with God. What Carl Jung there says, by my estimation, is that Roland drank to have a spiritual experience, to treat the disease he suffered from, which we call alcoholism, but it's a misnomer because it's really a disease of selfishness and self-centeredness. And whatever we use, we are treating selfishness and self-centeredness. And by telling my story to you, I'm getting out of self. And by hearing you tell your story to me, I'm healing. Thank you.
Hey, Spearheads, if you're looking to dive deeper into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous with people who live the solution, then you won't want to miss Reco12 Big Book Roundtable. Join David G., Nikki M., and me, the moderator Justin B., 3 recovered addicts from multiple fellowships, as we break down the big book line by line. In each 30-minute episode, we share our experience, strength, and hope in a real, raw, and practical roundtable discussion. So, if you are ready to learn and apply what you learn, tune in to Reco12 Big Book Roundtable on your favorite podcast platform.
Wow. Oh, sorry, I thought my camera was on. That was just unbelievable to be here, divinely inconvenienced, Friday at 10 a.m. here, being a mommy, needing to cook, needing to get started on my statistics for my master's degree. There's, no way this is ever convenient. And yet every time I show up, no place I'd rather be. This was particularly next level, Yisrael. We're gonna have to connect offline. I need all those stories and share them with my kids and all that. And fellows and sponsees. This was great. She closed up talking about, we tell our story, we get out of self, we learn about our own solution, hearing other people's story. We help other people heal by sharing our story. And you've certainly done that today. I'm going to use that kind of segue to plug again. If anyone wants to tell their recovery story, all addictions, all afflictions, if you're a debtor, a gambler, an alcoholic, Narcotics Anonymous, an Al-Anon, a codependent, or what other crazy thing or behavior you do or things you stuff to, try and get ease and comfort. We want to hear your story here. We want to hear about you, how you found a higher power, how you connected, how you became honest, open-minded, and willingness. 8 a.m. UK, 8 a.m. GMT +2 every Friday. But back to our regularly scheduled programming. Who has a good question for Yisrael? Who has a question? He shared so much about telling a story. You might want to ask him some advice about crafting your story in a way that is powerful. That's not something we've spoken about on here for the past 2 years. I think that's a fabulous topic. About how to tell your story in a way that makes a difference and helps reach the newcomer. Great. Lonnie, please send me a WhatsApp. Lonnie B, I'm going to love for you to send me a WhatsApp and speak. Yeah, we'd love to have you. We're going to line that up. But again, whatever hit home for you, that's where we're going, because, I need to hear what you have to say. So, okay, let me look in the chat. Did we get any questions in there? Ooh, Lonnie, Ayal, Ray. Oh, all-star lineup. Okay, wait. Can you guys send me a WhatsApp? Okay. Who's going to unmute? You don't really have to raise your hand. There are not so many of us. Who wants to unmute and ask a question?
I'll ask the question.
Great. And just introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Ria. I am an addict, boastful reader, bulimic, and fear-based individual. I want to know, Yisrael, first of all, thank you for the story about the Besht. It was awesome. It really it was like exactly what I needed to hear. I would love to hear your experience in maintaining on a daily basis that connection with the God of your understanding. I ask because it's something I'm really focused on at the moment, and trying to stay connected beyond those white light spiritual experiences that we read about in the big book. Because while we have we can have dramatic experiences, my recovery depends on daily conscious contact with my higher power. So I'd love to hear about how your experience with that and what you do.
So I'll start with, I remember a story from a speaker I heard, and he said, he was there in the middle of his talk, and he said, when is the one time you can have conscious contact with God? And I thought, ooh, when is the one time when you're working with a sponsor you don't like very much, when you're cleaning up a mess in a meeting that you didn't make, when you're putting a chair you didn't sit in, when you're cleaning a coffee pot when you didn't drink from. When is the one? I'm really trying really hard to think of the one time you can have conscious contact with God. And his answer was right now. Right now. I could be the best prayer in the world. I have reams. Those are all spiritual books. These are all Holocaust books, which are spiritual in nature to me. I got literature, right? I got stuff. As I said, I got the curls, I got strings, I got the long black coat, I got 10 black hats. I can look like the most religious person in the world, in my world. Long pants, I can make them look like knickers. I got high white socks, right now. And it's my experience. My experience this week, Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, we got word that my son went into Gaza. My 21-year-old son is in Gaza right now. I have to pray. I have a sponsee, and I don't even know if I really believe this, but I'll just tell you what he said. He said, worry is negative prayer. I don't I don't personally believe that I can worry my son into harm or, worry myself into cancer. That's not my deal. I need to pray to be effective, to be useful, to be of service, not to my son who's in Gaza. I can't touch that. He's there. But to my 3 children that are here, to my neighbors, to the people I'm driving around, the people I'm walking around, the people I'm interacting with in stores. I had a very bad day yesterday with Chase Bank, unfreezing, whatever. I didn't do well. And finally the call that worked was the one that I said, God, I need your help. Just help me not be an asshole when they ask stupid questions, when they say thank you when they don't mean it, when they say, did we help you? Can we help you? We understand. When they say all those stupid things people say, just keep my mouth shut. I don't think God reached down with his little finger that doesn't exist and touched my lips, but I was conscious of what I was trying to achieve. And as you said, yes, I mean, the Temple Mount is right out there, but I need God here. I need to be spiritual here. I need to leave at the end of the meeting and go to a live meeting and be nice to that sponsee who refuses to get out of self. And to guide him as best I can. The one who called twice, even though I had invited him to the meeting, because he's not in a space where he sees what I'm going through. He only sees what he's going through. He's locked in self. I don't believe people go out of their minds. I think people go into their minds. Out of my mind is the best place I can possibly be. Locked in my mind. My world is so small. I hope you've gotten a sense of how large and expansive my life is until I get locked in self, man. And then I'm figuratively in the closet with the rifle over my lap, in my underwear, peeking out of the door, waiting for them to come. And I live in the world. So I'll stop there. Any other questions?
That is just so great. Sorry. Go ahead. I just want to comment on that. That's just so great because we really need our fellows to help take us out of self, Sometimes we're even noble, This is a time of repentance here around these parts where Yisrael and Rita and I live, and like the other day, I called someone who I was hurt by, and then I realized recovery-wise, I was like, oh, I think I just barfed on her, I think I was just in self. Like, that's not repentance. That's not looking for where was I at fault, where was I to blame, I was hurt. But I didn't see that her son hasn't had children for 4 years. He's a young married guy. All I saw was me and my TLC and my attention. And this program helps us get out of self in a way that, I'm a pretty darn religious gal too. And this program helps us look at ourselves honestly in ways that many other things don't, I've done quite a few things, but I won't dazzle you with all that. We had a question here. Go ahead and unmute.
Hey Reco12 Spearheads, if our recovery resources have helped you, please consider a donation. Your financial support, as well as your word of mouth support, keeps Reco12 running and reaching the man who is still sick. Donate today at reco12.com/support or check the show notes for PayPal and Venmo links. Every contribution helps carry the message. Thanks for being a Reco12 Spearhead.
My name's Lonnie. I'm an alcoholic. It's such an honor. It's such an honor to be here. I got the text. I woke up to the text this morning in Poland. I'm not normally in Poland, about 3 times a year. And I called Yisrael. Sometimes I forget and I want to call you Chris. And what a blessing, because I felt so lonely here. It's really hard. The English-speaking meetings are at night. I don't always want to drive into Warsaw. And so when I saw this, I was just extraordinarily grateful. My question is this. It's like this idea of being spiritually inconvenienced. I immediately, and I'll look at this outside of the meeting, it's like I want to rush to my spouse's aid. So my spouse is a declared atheist, and yet he's one of the most spiritual people that I know. And he's been able to be sober for decade upon decade upon decade sober. And yet he doesn't have a spiritual practice. And he's a very lovely person. And so, I do believe that there are some of us that can be sober and lead lives that don't include God. Now, for me, that's a different story. I'm not religious. I'm deeply spiritual. When you propose the question of like, when's the perfect time to talk to God? I immediately said, all the time. Because the way that I express my belief is through this constant conversation. And answer the question in a second, but I want to share that Yisrael and I shared a friend, Amy, who is passed. She was a wonderful human being. And her prayer, she had a prayer. I'll screw it up, I know. But basically, she would throw her arms up and say to a God of her understanding, I don't understand. I need you to make this as if I am like the most ignorant person. Make me understand what it is your will is for me, whether it's with Chase Bank or making some large decision in my life. And so I go back to my question. What if some people don't believe in the way that we believe?
I think,
Israel?
okay, Lonnie, I think, first of all, we don't believe as each other believes already. Like, I'm sure we have conflicting beliefs in this very room. And that's fine in my book. Because, and I think, I think that, they think there's many, it's like language. I think of it as, and sometimes I think of it as language, and French people talk about cheese and we talk about cheese, and Arabic speakers talk about cheese, and we don't use the same words, but we're all talking about cheese. And so, whatever language we use to talk about whatever, because I think what we're talking about is connection. I think what we're talking about is getting out of self. I think what we're talking about is a power greater than ourselves that can restore us to sanity. I think that I don't know your husband that well, but I would bet dollars to donuts, as they say, that he does not think he's the greatest power in the universe. Right? No person, no atheist or agnostic that I know thinks they are the be all and end all of power in this universe. And that's what I think. The book says on page 93 that in working with others, it says, your guy might know a lot more about spirituality than you do. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have to believe what you believe. He says, stress the spiritual feature freely. If the man be agnostic or atheist, he means, of course, people, though we won't change that this year, that he does not have to agree with your conception of God. He can choose any conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself, and that he live by spiritual principles. Spiritual principles, whatever you call that. Mm-hmm. Some people call it religious beliefs, and some people call it like be kind, be generous, be thoughtful, be of service. I bring it back to service. I think that ultimately what we're here to do is be of service. And how can we be of service? And what's the best way to be of service? Yes, I can be an asshole and be of service, or I can be kind and be of service. Isn't that better? Isn't that more service? Aren't I doing better if I don't insist that I tell you you're wrong first and then help you? And point out and make sure you understand that you're wrong, and see that what you've been doing is pointless, and now I'll help you? Or should I just help you, to the best of my ability? And I say to people all the time, when they say, oh man, meetings are boring and everyone says the same things, and if I hear that woman talk about her cat one more time, it's like, you're not going to get. You're going to give. Bill Wilson said this was a spiritual kindergarten, and it is. And I love that idea because kindergarten is the most amazing place when you're 5. But if you even went back when you were 6, it would be boring. There's nothing new about kindergarten year 2. And if you went 45 years in a row, first of all, you'd get arrested. But if after you got arrested, or if you didn't get arrested and you attended kindergarten for the 45th year in a row and tried to get something out of it, because this is the place where I get spiritual growth, you'd die. No one's saying only get it here. Get it at wherever you get it. Find it where you find it. I opened the book, one of the books that I read from this morning, and the following prayer fell out, and I'll end with this. I love Amy's prayer. I loved Amy. Amy and I were Jewish, totally different kinds of Jews. She wouldn't have wanted to do what I do, and I wouldn't have wanted to do what she'd do. Nor did we have to. So this is Michael Judge. Michael Judge was the chaplain of the New York Fire Department, and he's considered the first person to be killed on the morning of 9/11. He died outside one of the towers before they had collapsed. Someone, I believe a body, fell on top of him and killed him. So his prayer was this: Lord, take me where you want me to go. Let me meet who you want me to meet. Tell me what you want me to say, and keep me out of your way. That's a good, simple prayer that I tuck in a book and completely forget.
Amen.
So, yeah, I'll stop there, Karen.
That's great. I mean, I don't know if that was the prayer you had selected to pray us out with. It's certainly as good as any. Oh, I love that Mediterranean group privately on WhatsApp. Did you want to?
I meant to send it to the whole group.
It's all good. Did you want to pray us out with a different official prayer? Or?
Sure. Let's be strict and pray ourselves out with the Serenity Prayer.
Nice.
Moment of silence for the addicts and alcoholics and whoever is suffering, that they may stop suffering and find a way to stop suffering. God, the serenity, accept the things that cannot change, courage to change the things that can,
and the wisdom to know the difference.